Hi, I'm Marvin Hurst. We are examining the complicated and volatile relationship between police and people of color. You know, the issues and perspectives are so extensive that we decided to break this down into 3 segments: the voices who want change, the police, and the solutions. Let's start with the people who say a change must come.
My name is Debbie Bush. I'm part of the Reliable Revolutionaries. I got involved when my nephew Marquise Jones was killed in 2014 by SAPD officer Robert Encina.
My name is Mike Smith. I'm a professor of criminology and criminal justice at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm a former police officer. By and large, the history of the black community and the police is fraught. It's tension-filled. For a long period of the history of blacks in the United States, the police were not, they were there to oppress them, right? They weren't there to lift them up, to protect their constitutional rights. That was not their role for 100 years or more.
My name is Farrell Clark. I'm a community advocate here in San Antonio with Reliable Revolutionaries of San Antonio. And our communities should see officers a lot more in a positive way. I shouldn't be seeing an officer for the first time when I'm being arrested.
My name is Ananda Thomas. I'm the Deputy Director for Fix SAPD. We're a grassroots organization focused on police reform, specifically through our police union contracts and legislation that, blocks police accountability.
When our loved ones are killed, it's like the police officer they cloak him and protect him and make sure he's okay and everything.
Well, I was talking to a lady just recently who was in tears after explaining to me that her son just turned 16 and she had to sit down and have the famous talk with him, explaining to him that because he was a young black man, that he didn't have the same rights that others had and enjoyed freely in this country. That if he was pulled over, he was to behave in a certain manner and that he had no rights, he must shut up, he must, basically he must bow down in all ways because he has no rights when it comes to dealing with people of authority. But yet we have to continue having these talks with our children because we know that their lives can be taken so easily and that if they are taken, there will be no accountability for that.
From an historical standpoint and how those experiences are lived and transmitted from family to family, generation to generation within the black community, yes, absolutely, I think it's the case today. I don't think you can escape that historical legacy.
It's not necessarily that they're bad so much as they are very resistant to change and any type of losing any sort of power for them, right? I don't feel like they're fully as connected with the community and what's going on for us as they should be.
My son actually put a plastic cover at his door that he has his registration, driver's license, and insurance information that he keeps right there. So if he gets pulled over, he doesn't have to make any sudden movements. He literally will just go like this and hand it to the officer. Our young men shouldn't have to live that way. They shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to live this way.
Now, having said that, our police have come a long way. The level of professionalism, the level of training, the level of respect for the rule of law, the law itself has changed, significantly. But that doesn't undo, over 100 years of oppression that, African Americans have felt at the hands of the police prior to the civil rights era of the mid-60s.
I get very upset and frustrated that they push this narrative that, oh, well, we're not these other cities, this doesn't happen here, when it absolutely does. We have stories of misconduct and abuse spanning back decades.
We're afraid to live. We're afraid to do anything because we feel like if we do, they're gonna find something to pick at us about and to arrest us, or either we end up dead. I'm sorry. I have friends and stuff that won't even call the police if something goes wrong because they're afraid that it will be escalated and someone will die.
People of color and who live in communities of color are in no more danger from the police than they were last year or 2 years from now, prior, or 5 years or 10 years. But they feel like they are, right? Fear of crime is up here. The reality of the chances of being victimized is way down here, right? Why are people much more fearful than the data suggests they should be?
It hurts because I've never been anti-police, but I'm anti-police brutality. I don't ever want to feel the pain that these mothers feel of knowing the person that killed their child will never see a jail cell. My face is pain for these families here in San Antonio. I hurt for them. I cry for them.
They run into danger every day, and these days they're also running into a lot of criticism. It's time for the police to have their say in a story about those who serve, protect, and want to be heard.
Danny Diaz. I'm a 29-year veteran of the San Antonio Police Department. Spent the better part of my career on the SWAT team.
My name's Bill McManus, and I'm the police chief here in San Antonio. Been here for going on 15 years now.
I am Officer Alonzo Harden. I'm with the San Antonio Police Department. I am currently the president of the San Antonio Black Police Officers Coalition.
I'm Gary Ramey. I'm a professor of law at St. Mary's University School of Law.
That uniform doesn't make you God. You put your pants on like everybody else does. The community that we deal with are not only your livelihood, but they're your best friends and your best source of information.
I take my role as a public servant literally. We've been probably one of the most progressive police departments in the country in terms of our policies and our practices.
I represent change, and I think it's important for members of the African American community, especially our youth, to see black officers. You can do this job. You can do this job and be a part of the change that's necessary. I back the blue, but I wake up black, so I understand.
For me, I think policing and race probably best boils down to understanding implicit bias. Because I think that's more what it's about now than it is about overt racism. We would be naive to think that racism doesn't exist in policing as it does in all public institutions and within all professions.
And there shouldn't be a fear. There shouldn't be the sense of trying to avoid police officers. We're here for everyone.
We have done so much changing our policies, revising our policies, implementing policies to make sure that our policies are the best out there as they pertain to our practices on the street and the way we deal with people on the street. how do we get the word out that all these things are being done? Because apparently they're not right now getting out the way I'd like them to get out, to let people know.
I've been called Uncle Tom, you're a sellout, how can you even wear that uniform? You think like them, you act like them, and we haven't even had a conversation. They know nothing about me. I'm here because a situation has gotten to the point where the police need to be involved, and it just happens to be me, a black man in uniform.
I don't think policing in the United States today is actually an expression of racism for the most part. And there are exceptions. Of course, there are exceptions. But I think more often when we see these terrible acts that occur with racial overtones, that those are likely to be the product of implicit bias.
People see us in a certain light. A lot of it is from what's transpiring across the country. Doesn't necessarily mean it's here. We do have issues. We take care of our own issues. I've arrested 6 officers in my career. Other officers have turned into officers that are doing things incorrectly. So we police ourselves to the best of our ability. And
These horrific videos that we see, or that we've seen, there's not one police chief that will defend any one of them. Granted, we're seeing a segment of it or a clip of it and don't know the background, but at least on its face, everyone is horrified by them.
you get cell phone videos, by the time somebody brings it out, they see the finished product. They see the officer shooting the individual. What led up to that point? And those are the things that people don't see.
I'm not one, I've learned early on not to jump to conclusions about things.
If you're breaking the law, if they're telling you to put your hands up or put your hands behind your back or whatever, and you're not following those instructions, then you're opening up Pandora's box.
There are some things that you just can't justify.
Police officers now are told repeatedly in every level of training, you need to be careful that you don't get killed on the job.
There's a saying in policing that no call is a routine call. You can't just go to a call and expect an outcome.
Because at the end of the day, you want to go home to your family. And if you make a mistake, as long as it's a reasonable mistake, the law isn't going to hold you to account for that mistake.
Been involved in shootings, was shot 3 times during a warrant. Look, we train to prepare on a what if, right? In the SWAT team, we what if everything to death, because we have to, because ultimately someone could lose their life, and that's not what we're there for.
Me personally, I have been in shootings that still mess with me today.
Not every shooting is the same. Every situation is different. There's nothing that's textbook, this is the way it's gonna happen.
It's a traumatic event. It's not something that I wish on any officer to experience or endure, as well as a citizen. The loss of a life is something you can't get back. But to be in a position to where if I have to decide it's me or them, I'm going home to my family. That's a mindset that you have to have.
I was told one time, y'all just drive up and shoot people. No, we don't just drive up and shoot people. We're there because somebody called us.
What's frustrating to me is, we take X number of steps forward in terms of changing policies, making substantive change in the department. And then when something happens, and it doesn't matter how small the department is or how remote the area is where the department is located, if something bad happens, it affects every police department in the country. And it sets everybody back to square one.
It's not easy. Sleepless nights, questioning one's actions, questioning reactions, thinking about the family members of the ones that lost a loved one or were seriously injured. It's like you want to forget it, but then there's something that reminds you of it, and then it takes you back to that time, and then it's almost like you're just going from way back then and trying to get forward again.
We're not here to take people's lives arbitrarily. We're here to protect the citizens. At the same time, officers need to protect themselves.
And then you don't want to go out and talk to everybody about it because you know, oh, you just have a gun, you can go and kill and shoot. No, I'm human. There's dignity in dealing with people. There's decency in you're talking about a human life. You're talking about something that is never going to come back, and you had something to do with it. Will I ever get over this? Will I ever get past this? Will I ever, will I ever be okay? Honestly, no. But you just have to deal with it the best that you can.
Things that we do is not personal. We're bound by an oath that we took and the laws that we have to uphold, and that's what it's about.
So we've examined the scars of the past, aired views from both sides, but is there really a desire to heal? Any real effort for these parties to sit down and hash things out?
I remember those vivid scenes from the Pettus Bridge. I remember that. And I remember there were police officers, and there were dogs, and there were fire hoses. That's an image that is going to keep me from basically wiping the slate clean and seeing all policing as an innocent exercise of authority.
Well, my name is Joe Gonzalez. I'm the Bexar County Criminal District Attorney here in Bexar County. I grew up on the west side of San Antonio, and I certainly saw my share of racial disparity.
We have the ability right now to really change things in America, to pivot and change how we look at race in America, how we look at police in America, and how those two interact.
My name is Attorney Artessa House. I own and operate Test House Law in San Antonio, Texas. Civil rights has been my passion since youth.
The general public has, I think, an impression now that the George Floyd cases of tragedies are normative, and they're not at all. They're aberrations in the extreme. What you don't see is the tens of thousands of police-citizen encounters that go perfectly fine, right?
It's kind of hard to say, hey, guess what, guys? We didn't shoot this guy today because this is what we did. That's not something that you put out on social media, but it's something that's very real and something that is really making a difference in officer-involved shootings.
But if you were to talk with police officers after the fact, I think in most of those instances, you might conclude that they were not consciously racist. They didn't go into that interaction thinking, this is a black person, this is a Latino. But they did go into those interactions with what very often is an unconscious set of understandings and stereotypes that then color their actions.
So there's systemic racism, over-policing, militarization of policing, microaggressions. Rather than fighting against this or ignoring people's perils, tuning in and paying attention to what they're saying. And so if we could get this to translate to our police departments, we'll be much better off.
I understand that the conversations in an African American household are going to be different from that of a Caucasian or even a Hispanic household, because that conversation is going to be based on the color of your skin and how you're going to be treated because of the color of your skin. There's a reason why the majority of the African American community does not trust the police. There's a reason why.
We have systemic racism. Even today, we see it in law enforcement, we see it in the prosecutor's office, we see it in the courts, we see it in education, we see it in business. And so the best thing we can do is recognize that it exists. Now, that's not to say that all cops are racist, all lawyers are racist, all judges are racist, but I think sometimes we have implicit bias that we don't recognize.
All you got to do is look around the country and see what happened when somebody says, "Hey, I'm pulling out my wallet," and boom, you know. Or, I mean, there's videos out there that justify that fear. There's stories that circulate that justify that fear. I get it.
The police officers know nothing's going to happen to me, so they're not nervous about anything. They're not scared about anything that they do to the community because they already know they're not going to do nothing to me.
We have to basically prove that the officers committed a crime and that they're, and I hate using this word, it's in the statute, but we have to disprove that the officer's conduct was justified. And that's a very difficult thing to do because oftentimes officers have to make a split-second decision about whether or not to fire their weapon. I've thought to myself, well, what if it was me sitting as the father or the husband, and that happened to my loved one? How would I feel? It's like ripping your heart out of your body to hear that, and I understand that, and I feel for them. And
the accountability is there. The problem is that there's been some issues where people have gotten off on technicalities, just like any average citizen could. Is it making us look bad? Sure. Those individuals, do we want them here? No, because it makes the rest of us look bad.
If you're talking about bad officers or officers that commit misconduct, they're not just harming us, they're harming other officers. They're tarnishing the name of the police union, of the police department. These are officers that use racial slurs or derogatory statements against other officers as well, or play a prank on the women's park substation restroom. At the end of the day, when we're looking at accountability and safety, I think we all have the same goals. We just not seeing eye to eye on them.
It's important that we back officers that are doing the right thing, but those that will not subscribe to the principles that the community feels it's important to police them, that they be let go to seek other employment, but not in law enforcement.
I think that history weights us down, and it keeps us from getting to something approaching a solution. That informs everything that we think, say, and do.
To me, change looks like accountability. It looks like more training on what to do, right? How to behave and how to react appropriately and under stress.
Our police officers are being trained to look at civilians as a threat. And this, I think, is a very flawed practice, and I believe this is where a lot of our problems are coming from.
If we would quit preaching that gospel of you're likely to get killed when you go out there today, so you always interact with people as if they're about to kill you. I think training is absolutely essential, but we're not going to train our way out of this.
If you think cops aren't afraid, then you don't know police work. They're every bit as afraid as you would be going into a situation where somebody's armed with a gun and wants to kill you. We need empathy. We need to be able to see people as human beings, no matter what what the color of their skin is or how much money they make.
The police act like they're above us and they're our slave masters and we do what we're told, and if we don't, then we're gonna suffer the consequences. They need to sit down with the community, and I'm not saying the churches, you need to sit with the community, not pastors and all those kind of people, your community, the people who you patrol.
A police officer's encounter with anyone in the public, specifically African American, it doesn't always have to be a negative encounter. It doesn't. There's a lot of prejudgments that needs to stop and give that person that human dignity, that human right, that decency to be treated fairly based on that initial situation, whatever that encounter is.
We need to have an understanding of the different perspectives, the perspective from the family member, the perspective from law enforcement, and the perspective from the district attorney's office.
Here we are in 2021 saying we want justice. At some certain point, you have to just become the justice that you want to see, right?
What you really need is a fundamental change in culture. That would be more effective.
At this particular time, at this particular juncture, with the relationships between police and the community, it's a time of healing. It's a time of rebuilding. This is a time to acknowledge it. Not forget about it, not try to make excuses about it, but this is a time to fix it.
And as far as I'm concerned, I love to use this phrase, there's no finish line. You know, we are about continuous improvement in everything that we do. Everything.
Let's sit down and work this out, because this place here, look, I'm born and raised San Antonio, right? I love this city.
And of course, we hope to follow those conversations, talks to help us all rise together. Thanks for watching.